I swear it wasn't supposed to mean anything. It was just one of those small, forgettable moments. The kind you laugh about later, maybe. But I keep replaying it like a song stuck in my head. It started the day I helped Myra's cousin fix her car. Her name was Elena, my girlfriend's cousin, visiting for a few days before heading back to Lahore. She was in her mid-40s, carried herself like she'd seen enough of the world to stop pretending. Nothing loud about her. No flashy perfume, no practiced smile. Just this calm confidence that made the rest of us feel a little less sure of ourselves. The car was parked in the narrow driveway behind my apartment, an old silver Civic with the kind of engine sound that said I've been ignored for years. Mira had texted me that her cousin needed help. Just be nice, she's not great with cars. When Elena arrived, I didn't expect the way the air around her would change the space. She wore a light gray sweater, sleeves rolled to her elbows, a thin silver bracelet glinting against her wrist as she leaned against the car door. "You're the one who knows about engines?" she asked, half amused. "Knows might be generous," I said, wiping my hands on a rag. "But I can fake it pretty well." She smiled, not big, not forced, just enough for her eyes to soften. We talked while I worked, small things, the kind of conversation you have when neither wants to say too much. She'd grown up in the same city, but hadn't been back in years. She missed the noise, she said. The bad traffic, the street tea that burned your tongue. Her voice had that quiet, textured kind of warmth that made everything she said feel closer than it should have been. Mira came out once, offered lemonade, then went back inside to take a call. After that, it was just us and the sound of tools clinking against metal. There was a moment, small but strange. Elena crouched beside me to see what I was doing. Her shoulder brushed mine. Just that. But I froze like someone had pulled the plug on my brain. "You're holding it wrong," she murmured. Her tone was teasing, but her hand reached for mine, guiding it, steady, firm. Her fingers were warm, not soft like I expected. She smelled faintly of jasmine and rain. And for some reason, I forgot to breathe. I don't know how long that pause lasted. Maybe 2 seconds, maybe 5, before she let go and stood up, brushing her jeans. "See? You'll make it worse if you rush," she said. Her voice was normal again. Steady. But the air wasn't. Later, when the car finally started, she leaned against the hood and looked at me, one eyebrow raised. "Guess you do know what you're doing." "I got lucky," I said. Her lips curved again. That same almost smile. And then, just before stepping into the car, she bit her bottom lip, eyes meeting mine in a way that felt deliberate. "Then I dare you to resist fixing things you shouldn't," she said lightly. It was half joke, half something else. She drove off a second later, her taillights fading into the dusk. But I stood there long after the sound disappeared, grease on my hands, her voice in my head. That night, I told myself it was nothing. But my hands still remembered the warmth of hers, and my mind kept asking why her words didn't sound like a dare about a car. And that's the part one couldn't shake. She showed up again 3 days later, this time holding a cardboard box and an apologetic smile. "Mira said you'd help me with some shelves," Elena said. "Unless your day's already ruined." It wasn't, but I almost wished it was, because having her here again meant I'd have to pretend that moment by the car hadn't kept me awake for nights. The living room was cluttered, half-assembled furniture, open screws, the faint smell of varnish. She put the box down, looked around, and let out a soft sigh. "I forgot how loud silence gets when you're living alone," she said. There it was, a tiny crack in her calm. I handed her a screwdriver. "You don't strike me as the kind who lets furniture win." Her lips twitched. "Oh, I've lost to worse things than wood and nails." The words came out with that same dry composure, but something about the way she said them, the faint drop in tone, the faraway look in her eyes, made me stop tightening the bolt. We worked side by side. I noticed things I shouldn't have, the faint tremor in her hands when she lifted a plank, how she pressed her palm to her lower back after bending down, the way her hair kept falling into her face, and she didn't bother fixing it. She was tired, not in a physical way, but in the way people get when they've been holding everything together too long. "Your girlfriend said you're still studying?" she asked after a while. "Trying to," I said, mostly pretending I've got it figured out. She smiled faintly, eyes still on the shelf. Pretending works, for a while. I wanted to ask what she meant, but she already turned away, measuring the next piece, her expression neutral again. An hour passed like that, talking, not talking, small glances that lasted a beat too long. At one point, she dropped a screw, and when I bent down to pick it up, her hand brushed mine again. This time she pulled back immediately. Too quickly. Sorry, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. It's okay, I murmured, even though my pulse disagreed. After that, she grew quieter. I tried to fill the silence with small talk. Music, cities, weather, but she answered in short, careful sentences. Then, when the last shelf was finally upright, she leaned against it and exhaled like she'd been holding her breath all day. It's crooked, she said softly. It's honest, I said. That made her laugh, short and real. She brushed her hair back and looked at me for a second that felt longer than it should have been. You notice too much, she said finally. I think you hide too much, I said before I could stop myself. Her eyes lingered on mine. A flicker of surprise, then something else. A hesitation, like she wanted to say something but thought better of it. She took her keys, smiled that half-smile again, and walked toward the door. But just before leaving, she paused, one hand on the handle. Some things don't need fixing, she said quietly, without turning around. Then she was gone, and I stood there, surrounded by crooked shelves and the faint scent of her perfume, realizing that whatever this was, it was no longer something I could ignore. It rained that night, the kind that muffles everything, even your thoughts. Mira had gone to visit her parents for the weekend, and Elena texted me just before dusk. Power's out here. Yours too. It was. Half the neighborhood was dark. I told her she could wait it out at my place if she didn't want to sit in the dark alone. I didn't think she'd actually show up, but 20 minutes later, there she was, damp from the rain, holding a half-soaked umbrella and that same careful calm she wore like armor. The apartment was lit by a few candles, soft, uneven light that made everything feel closer than it should. She sat by the window, sipping tea, while thunder rolled faintly in the distance. You ever notice how quiet everything gets before it storms? She said. I nodded. Yeah, like the world's holding its breath. Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, neither of us looked away. Then she smiled, small, reluctant. You always say things like that. Like what? Like you're older than you are. I laughed, but it came out awkward. And you talk like someone who wishes she weren't. That earned me a silence that felt heavier than any argument. She turned her gaze toward the rain, her reflection flickering in the glass, tired, distant, beautiful in a way that hurt to look at too long. The power flickered once, then again. She jumped slightly, then laughed at herself. You'd think after 45 years, I'd be over being startled by thunder. It's not the thunder, I said before I could stop myself. It's being alone when it happens. She turned back toward me. This time, really looked. And there it was again, that faint tremor in her composure, like the wall she'd built was thinning, just for a second. You think too much, she said softly. Only when I'm around you. That made her exhale, not quite a laugh, not quite a sigh. She leaned back, eyes closing for a moment. You shouldn't say things like that. YOT. Because sometimes words sound like promises, she murmured. And promises break things. A vibration broke the silence. Her phone, lighting up on the table. A name flashed on the screen. Rayhan. She stared at it, but didn't move. The phone buzzed again. Then she pressed the power button, the light vanishing into black. Someone important? I asked, immediately wishing I hadn't. Someone who used to be, she said, voice steady but eyes far away. Some things don't survive endings. People just pretend they do. We didn't talk after that. The room filled with the sound of rain hitting the glass, soft and rhythmic. She got up after a while, walked past me toward the kitchen, the faint brush of her sleeve against mine enough to send a quiet ache down my chest. When she came back, she set my cup down beside me and sat, closer than before. Our knees nearly touched. The candles flickered, shadows dancing between us. I could feel the warmth of her body, smell the faint trace of her shampoo. She turned her head slightly, her voice barely a whisper. You should get some sleep. So should you. I can't, she said. Then, Quieter, not tonight. For a heartbeat. It felt like the world leaned in with us, waiting. And just before anything could happen, the power returned. Bright, sudden, blinding. She stood up quickly, smoothing her sweater. "Looks like the storm's over," she said, not looking at me. But when she left a few minutes later, the air still smelled like rain, and I realized the storm hadn't even begun. It had been a week since the storm, but something between us hadn't cleared. When I saw her again, it was at Myra's apartment. All bright chatter, family noise, the smell of chai and cardamom. Elena was there, sitting at the dining table, smiling politely as Mira told a story about work. She didn't look at me, not once. But her hands, I saw them tremble when she lifted her cup. Later, after everyone left for a walk, I stayed back to help her clean the dishes. The sound of water filled the kitchen, steady, endless. She didn't speak. I didn't either. Finally, she said, "You've been avoiding me." I froze mid-rinse. "You're the one who's been pretending nothing happened." Her eyes flicked up, sharp, startled, then softened. "Nothing did happen." "You sure?" She turned off the tap. The sudden silence was deafening. Water dripped from her fingers onto the counter. "What do you want me to say?" "That night," I said quietly, "you stayed. You could have left, but you didn't." She looked down, pressing the towel between her hands. "And you could have told me to." Neither of us moved. The hum of the refrigerator filled the pause. I could see the reflection of both of us in the kitchen window. Two blurred outlines, standing too close, saying too little. "I don't know what this is," she said finally, her voice steady but hollow. "You're young." You're not a math problem," I interrupted. "You don't get to sum yourself up like that." That made her laugh, short, bitter, tired. "You sound like someone who hasn't made enough mistakes yet." I stepped closer, slow enough that she could stop me if she wanted to. She didn't move. Her perfume was faint tonight, more warmth than scent. "Then maybe let me make one," I said quietly. Her eyes lifted to mine, not shocked, not angry, just scared. Not of me, but of herself. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't make this into something it can't be." "Then what is it?" She swallowed hard. She stopped. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. For the first time, she didn't seem composed. Her hands gripped the counter until her knuckles paled. I waited, giving her the space she always kept between us. She exhaled slowly. "You look at me like I'm someone worth saving," she said finally. "And that's not fair. You don't know what I've already broken." The words hung there, fragile and aching. I wanted to say something, that I didn't care, that I just wanted to understand her. But she turned away, picking up her bag. "This isn't your story to fix," she said, voice trembling now. "Don't make it about us. There isn't an us." And just like that, the air shifted. Whatever thread had pulled us together felt stretched, burning, about to snap. She walked to the door, paused once, and whispered without turning back, "Stop looking at me like you could love me." Then she was gone, and I realized silence had said what neither of us could survive saying out loud. I didn't see her for almost 2 weeks. Mira said Elena had gone back to Lahore early. "Work emergency," she claimed, though she didn't seem convinced herself. I told myself it was for the best. Whatever that thing between us was, that unspoken current, it needed to fade before it turned into something we couldn't undo. But then, late one night, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You left your jacket in my car. Thought you'd want it back." No greeting. No name. But I knew. The next day, I found myself outside her place. She looked surprised when she opened the door, like she hadn't expected I'd actually come. "You didn't have to," she started, but I cut in. "It's fine. I was nearby." We both knew that was a lie. Her apartment was smaller than I expected, quiet, lived in. Books stacked unevenly on a table, half-finished tea by the window. The kind of place that holds memories like dust, soft, but everywhere. She handed me my jacket, then turned toward the shelf. "I wasn't planning to stay long," she said. Then again, I never planned much lately. Something in her voice made me look closer. She seemed lighter, somehow, but also hollow around the edges. On the table, beside her mug, was a photograph in a cracked frame. It was of her, younger, hair longer, and a man with kind eyes, arms around her shoulders. I didn't mean to ask. Your husband? She hesitated, then nodded. Was. I stayed quiet. He died 3 years ago, she said finally. Heart attack. He was 46. Her tone was calm, almost rehearsed, but her thumb kept brushing the edge of the frame again and again. I don't talk about him much, she added. People get uncomfortable around grief. They try to fix it. So I stopped letting anyone try. I didn't know what to say. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. He used to help me with shelves, she said, smiling faintly. Never got one straight. He'd say, it's the imperfection that keeps it standing. My chest tightened. I remembered saying almost the same thing to her weeks ago. That's why you looked at me that night, I said quietly. I reminded you of him. Her eyes lifted, startled, caught off guard. No, she whispered. Then softer. Yes. Maybe. I don't know. She looked down, her fingers tightening around the frame. Sometimes I hear his voice when I shouldn't. Sometimes I see him in people who aren't him. It's cruel, isn't it? How memory doesn't fade. It just changes faces. Her words sat between us, raw, trembling. I took a breath. You don't have to apologize for remembering. She met my gaze then, steady, unguarded. For the first time, there was no distance, no deflection. I'm not apologizing, she said. I'm terrified. Something in the way she said it broke me a little. The clock ticked. Outside, a car passed, headlights brushing the window. She set the photo down, carefully, almost reverently. Then, without warning, she whispered, you weren't supposed to matter. And in that moment, it wasn't a confession. It was a collapse, quiet, inevitable, and entirely real. She didn't ask me to stay, but she didn't ask me to leave either. After her words, you weren't supposed to matter. The room just held its breath. Elena sat on the edge of the couch, shoulders drawn in, fingers tracing the rim of her mug though it had long gone cold. I sat opposite her, jacket still in my hands, heart beating with the dull ache of something that couldn't quite be named. You should go, she said finally, but it didn't sound like a request. More like a line she was trying to remember. I didn't move. You don't actually want me to, do you? She looked up, her eyes glassy but dry. It would be easier if I did. The truth of that landed between us, gentle, heavy. Minutes passed like hours. Rain started again, faint against the windows. She exhaled, the kind of breath people take when they've been holding too much for too long. I keep trying to stop caring, she said quietly. But every time I do, it feels like I'm betraying something I didn't even choose. I swallowed. Maybe you're just remembering how to feel again. She smiled, barely. You talk like you've lived 1,000 years. Maybe I've just been waiting too long for something real. She leaned back, eyes closing. The silence grew deeper, but not cold. More like a blanket we both hid under. Then, almost absently, she whispered, it's wrong. I nodded. I know. And yet, she opened her eyes again, meeting mine. Whatever had been restrained for weeks softened then. Not broken, not confessed, just released. I moved without thinking, sitting beside her on the couch. She didn't pull away. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Our shoulders barely touched, but that small point of contact was enough to make everything inside me tremble. Not from desire, but from relief. She reached for her mug again, then stopped midway. Her hand hovered, uncertain. I covered it gently with mine. Her fingers stiffened, then eased, folding slowly into my palm. The warmth was fragile, hesitant, like something alive that might vanish if we moved too fast. She didn't look at me when she spoke next. You know this can't go anywhere. I know, I said. And still, she murmured, you're here. Still, I said. Her head tilted slightly, her shoulder brushing mine. The contact felt unintentional, but it wasn't. I could feel her heartbeat. Faint, steady, painfully human. Neither of us reached for more. We just sat there, two people who had run out of excuses, letting the world shrink to a quiet room and a shared pulse. When she finally spoke again, it was a whisper so soft I almost missed it. Maybe some things aren't meant to last, she said. Maybe they're just meant to change us. She didn't pull her hand away. And that was the moment. Not a kiss, not a confession, but a quiet collapse into something that didn't need words at all. Outside, the rain softened. Inside, The silence felt like peace. It's strange how quiet endings can be. There's no music, no door slam, no speech that ties everything up. Just the slow fading of something that once felt too heavy to hold, until it doesn't anymore. It's been months since I last saw Elena. Mira and I ended things not long after that night. Not because of Elena, not really, but because we both knew the truth. I was already somewhere else, even if nothing ever happened. I still pass by the street where Elena used to live sometimes. The window where her light always stayed on late is dark now. Someone new must live there. The shells we built together are probably gone, replaced, repainted. But I still remember the tilt of one. The one she called honest. Funny, the things that stay. I think about her less now. Or maybe I just think about her differently. Not as Myra's cousin. Not as the woman I almost crossed the line for. But as the person who showed me that love isn't always something you chase. Sometimes it's something that stops you in your tracks and makes you see yourself for who you are. I learned that affection isn't just in the words you say. It's in the pauses, the things you don't act on. That sometimes restraint can mean more than surrender. She once told me, some things aren't meant to last. They're just meant to change us. At the time, it sounded like an excuse. Now it sounds like grace. I don't know if she ever thinks of me. Maybe in passing, maybe not at all. But I do know this. She taught me what tenderness looks like when it's quiet. What love feels like when it never gets to call itself love. And I carry that with me. Not as guilt, but as proof that even the wrong people can bring out something right in you. Sometimes, when it rains, I still hear the echo of that storm. The one that started everything. I still remember the warmth of her hand in mine. The way silence filled the room, the way she whispered, "You weren't supposed to matter." And maybe she was right. Maybe we weren't supposed to. But we did. And that's enough. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?